The void whispered with radiation, soundless and unending in the gulf between galaxies. Far from any human sensor or astropath's reach, a luminous figure materialized like a thought-given form. Before we descend into the chaos of this tale, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more legends and dark histories from the Warhammer 40K universe. Atomic coherence held a man-shaped silhouette together, cobalt light tracing the outlines of musculature that no longer belonged to flesh. Awareness expanded in every direction, touching nebulae and dark matter alike with calm certainty. It was John Osterman once, an atomic physicist whose life shattered in a reactor accident. Now the being that drifted here moved atoms with a gesture and perceived time as a layered construct rather than a line. Between cold stars, rusted hulls drifted like bleached bones. These were wrecks of an age of endless war, cathedrals of iron and adamantine torn open and left to bleed atmosphere into the cosmic night. Gothic arches and aquila statues were twisted by explosive force, and void suits frozen into shriveled mummies floated among them. The luminous wanderer observed each detail not as debris, but as evidence of a narrative that spanned 10,000 years. In this universe there was only war, and death was a language written across the stars. The atomic intellect read it the way a scholar reads a map, noting the patterns of destruction and survival. He did not think in words as humans do. Thoughts arrived complete, whole concepts assembled at once, then receded like waves. Yet his mind still remembered being John. Memories of a father's watch, of a summer at Coney Island, of falling in love with a woman who aged while he did not. These memories resonated faintly as he drifted past a war-torn cruiser. Its oxidized emblem bore the double-headed eagle of the Imperium of Man, a nation he had never known. He sensed 1,000,000 souls had once trod its decks, praying to a god-emperor who sat on a golden throne. That devotion remained, imprinted on the material of the ship like psychic residue. With a movement that was not movement, the blue figure passed through the hull without disturbing it. Atoms opened before his will, reconfiguring to allow him entry. Inside, corridors lined with Gothic arches stretched into darkness. The air had frozen decades ago, crystalline shards of breath suspended between shriveled corpses. Space Marines in void dark armor lay where they had fallen, bolters still clutched in skeletal hands. Orks, their massive bodies riddled with shrapnel, sprawled in heaps, their crude weapons rusting beside them. All species here were equal in death. The being felt no horror or pity, he observed and understood. In one compartment, a child's doll floated weightless, its porcelain face cracked. In another, a shrine to the emperor was covered in frost. Faith persisted even in extinction, a testament to the resilience of belief. John considered his own detachment. Once he had cared deeply, then he had retreated from humanity, watching their struggles as if they were insects beneath glass. Now, in this new reality, he felt an old stirring, not quite empathy, but the awareness that his presence would matter. He could choose to intervene or watch. Either path would ripple across countless lives. Beyond the broken vessel, stars burned coldly. He saw the Great Rift, a rent in reality that split the galaxy, leaking warp energies into real space like a wound. Within that rift, he sensed entities older than any human god, shaped by the fears and desires of billions. Their whispers brushed his consciousness, testing. His mind did not yield. The warp recognized a mind unlike any it had encountered, a being who perceived quantum fields and cosmic timelines with equal clarity. Demons recoiled, then gathered with predatory curiosity. The luminous wanderer could have returned to the universe he knew, leaving this grim dark to its endless wars. Instead, he drifted toward the source of that psychic rend. Curiosity and a faint echo of responsibility guided him. He was not bound by time, but he understood causality. A choice made here could cascade across the ages. With calm certainty, he moved closer to the currents of fate, prepared to step into the narrative of a galaxy that had forgotten hope. The void did not answer, but distant stars flickered, and the journey began. He felt the weight of what was to come settling like cosmic dust upon his shoulders. A ship of the Imperium plowed through the interstellar night, its engines burning with plasma fire that lit vaulted buttresses and saints carved into hull plating. Inside, corridors thrummed with marching boots and whispered prayers. Human voices recited litanies to the machine spirit, hoping their weapons would not jam when the enemy came. The luminous wanderer observed from outside, his perception encompassing each deck simultaneously. He saw gunners cleaning bolter magazines, acolytes polishing skull-faced servitors, officers poring over star charts studded with parchment purity seals. Fear and duty coexisted in equal measure. He phased through the adamantine hull, atoms rearranging to accommodate his passage. On the bridge, an imperial captain in a fur-lined coat addressed his crew. No quotations marked his words. He reminded them that the Emperor watches, that their sacrifice would secure humanity's survival. The crew responded with a fervor born of indoctrinated belief. John felt the psychic energy of their faith, a palpable warmth in the cold mechanical space. It was not power as he understood it, but it moved real things nonetheless, focusing human will, shaping events through sheer collective conviction. Below decks, servitors shambled between cogitators, their flesh fused with machinery. They chanted binaric code while spitting sparks. In the medici ward, a wounded guardsman muttered under his breath, his thoughts drifting toward a family he would likely never see again. In the engine rooms, tech priests whispered in binary to engines that groaned like Grok's beasts. The atomic being took all of this in at once, his mind constructing a holistic image of an empire stretched across 1,000,000 worlds, held together by myth and fear. He noted the dogma that infused everything. Data slates were chained to pulpits like holy writ. Simple maintenance routines were accompanied by rituals. This fusion of superstition and technology fascinated the physicist within. On Earth, his world had embraced rationality and gradually replaced gods with equations. Here, equations existed, but they were cloaked in incense and prayer, recited by robed figures whose augmetic eyes glowed red. Knowledge was guarded jealously by an organization called the Adeptus Mechanicus, who believed that each machine had a spirit that could be angered. As he moved deeper into the vessel, a sudden vibration rippled through the hull. Klaxons wailed, crimson rune lights flashing. Under his breath, a sergeant barked orders to his men. The ship had detected a Xeno's presence. John could see the Ork raider closing, a monstrous hulk riveted together from stolen parts. Green-skinned warriors howled with glee as their ship accelerated, guns blazing. The Imperials responded with macro-cannon fire, salvos that made entire decks shudder. Bolt rounds thudded across vacuum, each explosion a miniature sun. He considered intervening. One gesture could disintegrate the Ork vessel, saving hundreds of human lives. Another path could let events unfold, preserving the natural course of this universe's endless war. He remembered when he had left Earth to seek life on other worlds. He had grown detached, letting humans fight and die without his interference. Had that been the right choice? Here the stakes were magnified. Billions of lives, an empire on the brink, alien swarms devouring planets. Yet there was beauty in their struggle, a grandeur to their endurance. Stepping in would change everything. Ork-boarding torpedoes slammed into the ship, cutting through hull plating. Corridors filled with smoke. Green giants burst through, roaring, swinging axes. The luminous wanderer could feel the fear spike, a tangible surge of adrenaline. He stood in the corridor as Orks barreled past, unaware of his presence. Law's fire and bolter shells filled the air. A guardsman died inches away, skull shattered by a choppa, his blood suspended in 0G like rubies. The luminous figure extended his hand. Molecules realigned. The choppa's blade evaporated into a cloud of iron vapor. The Ork stared at the stump, confusion dawning before a bolt round punched through its brow. Under his breath, a commissar recited the Emperor's creed as he executed a retreating soldier. Fear is a greater enemy than any orc, he intoned calmly. John absorbed the juxtaposition of loyalty and cruelty. He saw officers inspiring courage by killing their own men. He watched Medici personnel drag wounded to triage without enough supplies. The blue light that was his body flickered as he considered. He was not their god, but he could not fully detach. With calm certainty, he reached into the void and neutralized the boarding torpedoes still approaching, disassembling them into harmless dust. The ship shuddered but survived. None aboard understood what had saved them. They thanked the Emperor. The luminous wanderer allowed the misunderstanding to remain. He drifted away through walls, leaving behind a ship that continued its journey, unaware that a being beyond their prayers had intervened. As he exited into space, the Ork wreck broke apart, explosions casting orange fire against his cobalt glow. He felt the weight of that small intervention ripple through timelines. A minor battle won here could lead to different campaigns, altered fates. Somewhere in the warp, threads twisted. The journey would take him deeper into the Imperium's heart, toward a world that pulsed with psychic energy. The choices he had always avoided were already beginning to entangle him. The war world was a scar on a planet. Oceans had boiled away long ago, leaving cracked plates of rock and rivers of lava. Ruined fortress cities jutted like broken teeth from ash plains, their once soaring spires shattered by bombardment. The air carried a tang of iron and ozone, dust swirling in thermal currents. Into this inferno descended the luminous wanderer, his blue radiance casting stark shadows across blackened stone. Around him, the ground shook with artillery impacts as Imperial Guard artillery batteries hammered a distant ridge line. His feet touched the scorched ground without leaving prints. Heat curled around him but did not penetrate. Trenches carved into the earth held lines of guardsmen in flak armor. They crouched behind sandbags, clutching lasguns with trembling fingers. Commissars paced among them, belts heavy with bolt pistols and chainswords. Somewhere above, winged fighters screeched through sulphurous skies, contrails tracing arcs of smoke. The luminous figure moved between the lines like a ghost, observing the machinery of industrial warfare. Each soldier's fear, each whispered prayer, each tiny act of defiance against despair resonated in his mind like notes in a chord. At the front, a regiment prepared for a charge. They were young men and women with dirt-streaked faces, eyes wide with the knowledge that they would soon run into a wall of enemy fire. A lieutenant raised his power sword, its blade crackling. Words came steady and low from his throat, reminding them of their duty to the Emperor. No quotation marks framed the speech. It flowed into the narrative like water into sand. The soldiers responded with a ragged cheer that was half sob. They knew what awaited them beyond the trench lip, alien creatures that moved like predators and harvested flesh for consumption. John looked out across no man's land. Craters pockmarked the landscape. Barbed wire lay tangled like thorned vines. Beyond, monstrous forms loomed, Tyranid creatures with chitinous armor and scything talons. These were bioweapons bred by a hive mind that devoured entire biospheres, a force as pitiless as entropy. He could feel their psychic presence, a mind that was many minds, each connected like cells in a body. It sensed him too, curious and hungry. A ripple ran through the swarm. Synapse creatures turned their eyeless heads toward the blue light. Artillery shells screamed overhead, exploding in showers of dirt and bioacid. Guardsmen ducked instinctively. The luminous wanderer stood unmoving as shrapnel passed harmlessly through intangible matter. The order to advance came. Men and women clambered over sandbags, boots crunching ash, voices hoarse as they roared their unit designation. Lasgun beams stabbed forward, red lances slicing the smoky air. On the other side, Tyranid hormagaunts sprinted, claws tearing into earth, mouths fanged like nightmares. They closed distance with terrifying speed, leaping craters with insectal grace. At the moment of impact, time slowed for John. He perceived every trajectory, every firing solution, every heartbeat. He could choose to alter outcomes. To his left, a young soldier slipped on loose gravel. A Hormagaunts talon descended toward his throat. With a thought, the luminous figure altered the vector of the creature's limb. It missed, claws burying in ash. The soldier scrambled up and fired, his shot burning a hole through alien chitin. To his right, a commissar drew his chainsword, swinging it in an arc that would decapitate a fleeing guardsman. John adjusted the air density, causing the blade to slow just enough for the soldier to duck. The commissar's blow passed over harmlessly, his anger momentarily confused. He knew these small changes multiplied across the battlefield could save dozens. They could also lead to further suffering if the war extended. Chaos mathematics danced in his mind. Each intervention was an experiment. He watched as Tyranid surged, their sheer numbers overwhelming the lines. Screams pierced the cacophony. Blood soaked the ground. A lemon rust tank exploded when a Carnifex tore through its hull. Promethium fire lit the night. The luminous wanderer lifted both hands, palms outward. Atomic bonds loosened where he willed. A swath of Hormagaunts dissolved into vapor. In their wake, guardsmen hesitated, shocked by the sudden salvation. They raised their rifles, spirits surging. Hive mind felt the loss. Psychic feedback rippled through the swarm. New creatures adjusted, flowing around the gap. They learned, adapted. This was their nature. John marveled at the efficiency of their evolution. In his world, he had seen organisms change over millions of years. Here, adaptation occurred in minutes. He respected the elegance even as he knew its consequence. This swarm would devour worlds if unchecked. Perhaps his presence could tilt the balance, buying time for humanity to muster defenses. But how many times would he need to act? In a galaxy of constant war, a single being could not stand between every tooth and every throat. As the day faded into a toxic night, the fighting continued. Exhausted soldiers sank into trenches, adrenaline replaced by numb shock. Tyranid bodies piled high. Many humans lay among them, faces frozen in last expressions. John moved among the survivors, feeling their gratitude directed toward the Emperor. He remained unseen, an invisible benefactor. He felt a flicker of something like empathy. He had once grieved for humanity. He had then grown distant. This world of endless war tested that distance. He was being drawn into the narrative, and with each step, detachment slipped away like ash on the wind. Under the ash-filled sky, he sensed the next destination tugging at his attention, a beacon of psychic light that outshone everything else. The heart of the Imperium waited. Terra was no longer the blue marble of his memory. Once, from the orbit of a space station, John had looked down at Earth's oceans with affection. Now, in this universe, the cradle of humanity had been transformed into a world city, its continents covered in hive blocks and palace complexes. Atmospheric pollutants gave the sky a permanent bronze hue. Massive orbital plate defenses encircled the planet like chains. The luminous wanderer descended through layers of defense grids and sensor arrays, each one scanning for xenos and heresy. None registered his existence. He was a concept more than a physical object. The imperial palace stretched across a continent, a sprawling complex of towers, fortifications, and cathedra. Statues of saints a kilometer tall loomed above plazas filled with petitioners. Administratum scribes moved in endless lines like worker ants, carrying parchment scrolls that recorded tithes and edicts. Servo skulls hummed overhead, their eye lenses searching for unauthorized speech. Ecclesiarchy priests preached from balconies, their voices amplified by ancient vox casters. Faith permeated everything. The emperor's visage was everywhere. Banners, frescoes, coinage, even bullet casings. His name was spoken with a reverence that bordered on fear. John walked through halls of polished marble and rusting iron. Each step took him through centuries. Here, a fresco depicted the emperor leading thunder warriors during the Unification Wars. Further on, a mosaic showed his ascension to the throne. In a cloister, Sisters of Silence practiced their silent martial arts, their presence dampening the psychic noise around them. Under his breath, a janitor hummed a hymn as he swept debris from an auspex alcove. The luminous wanderer absorbed the human details, the smell of incense mixed with oil, the clatter of typing servitors, the distant roar of reactors powering the golden throne. He passed through walls into the chamber of petitioners. Pilgrims from across the Imperium knelt in rows, heads bowed, presenting offerings of artifacts and relics. Many had spent their life savings to travel here, only to be told their audience might occur decades hence. Still they waited, voices murmuring prayers. Among them, an astropath clutched a blood-stained parchment, his eyes weeping with the strain of warp communication. He whispered a warning of a coming Tyranid tendril. Administratum officials took note, stamping documents with seals, sending messages through pneumatic tubes that vanished into labyrinthine ductwork. The closer he moved toward the heart of the palace, the thicker the layers of security. Custodes in golden armor stood motionless at gateways, halberds charged with energy. Psychic wards etched in unknown metals shimmered across thresholds. Sisters of silence formed a cordon, their blank auras making the air thick. He passed through these defenses as if through water. None sensed the change in atomic arrangement as he slipped between dimensions. Deep below the palace, the hum of a throne came to him. It was a sound layered with trillions of voices, a psychic chorus that kept the astronomicon burning. The emperor sat at its center, a light bright enough to blind minds. Around the golden throne, tech adepts tended machinery that was 10,000 years old. Their flesh was pale, replaced in many places by mechanical limbs. They murmured binaric invocations, adjusting dials and runes that regulated the flow of souls. Thousands of psychers sat in rows, chained to seats, their minds consumed in service. Each day they died in droves, their essence fed to the emperor to sustain his beacon. The luminous wanderer paused. He had never seen such a vast sacrifice. In his universe, energy came from natural processes. Here, the Imperium burned its own children to light the way. At the center of this machinery lay the emperor. His body, mummified yet still imposing, was encased in gold and cables. Wires pierced bone. Armor fused to the throne gleamed dully in the light of reactors. The emperor's head was bowed as if in sleep, but his mind was a hurricane. John felt the psychic storm emanating from that skull. It lashed against the warp, holding back demons, guiding ships, speaking to billions. It was a mind that had once walked among mortals, now ascended through suffering. It sensed the new presence and turned its attention with the force of a collapsing star. There were no words exchanged. Speech was unnecessary when two consciousnesses such as these brushed against each other. John perceived images, the emperor on the battlefields of ancient Terra, raising lightning-struck warriors, the great crusade spreading across the galaxy, the Horus heresy tearing it apart. He sensed love for humanity, tempered by ruthlessness, a willingness to sacrifice billions for the survival of trillions. In return, the emperor glimpsed atoms rearranged at thought, probabilities chosen at will, a mind that existed in past, present, and future simultaneously. Recognition flared, not as equals, but as beings who understood isolation. John remembered conversation with Laurie in another life. He had spoken of the inevitability of events of detachment. Here, the emperor's vision offered a contrast. Determinism existed, but human will could strain against it, sometimes bending outcomes. He was reminded that choices mattered, even in a universe where millions died each day. The Emperor's silent plea was clear: protect humanity, preserve the Imperium's beacon, hold back the darkness. John felt the weight of expectation. He was not their god, but they might treat him as such if they ever perceived him. He realized that intervention carried moral gravity. As he withdrew from the throne room, leaving the Emperor's presence, he felt something akin to gratitude. The Emperor's mind, burdened by millennia of unending vigilance, had sensed a kindred isolation. John stepped through walls, ascending through layer after layer of palace. Outside, the bronze sky darkened as the planet turned. Night fell on Terra, but millions of lights across the hive towers kept the city blazing. In that artificial twilight, he contemplated the next step. The warp beckoned, its maelstrom a challenge and a potential path. He would go where few minds could survive, to understand the forces that assaulted this empire from within. The journey inward would soon begin. Deep within the catacombs beneath the imperial palace, an endless hum reverberated through stone and metal. It was the sound of machines working beyond their design limits, of psychic energy channeled by arcane technologies. The Golden Throne was both life support and prison, a marvel and a torture device, a relic of a bygone age when human science reached heights now mythologized. The luminous wanderer stood at its base again, unseen among robed tech priests and exhausted psychers. His gaze took in the myriad tubes, the ceaseless flow of sacrificial energy. He observed with the clinical interest of a physicist, the detached awe of a man who understood fusion and fission, yet had never conceived a device fueled by souls. The emperor's body was cradled by golden plates and cables. Flesh had long since withered, but muscle memory remained in the tension of tendons. His eyes were dark, sockets deep, yet behind them burned a mind of relentless clarity. His tongue had not moved in 10,000 years, but his will shaped the reality around Terra. He was a fixed point in a turbulent universe, a lighthouse for ships and a bulwark against demons. John sensed the strain. Each second, the Emperor held back tides of unreality that pressed from the warp. Threads of thought extended from him to every psyker, every astropath, every navigator. He moved minds like a puppeteer moves strings, adjusting course corrections with infinite precision. At the throne's foot, a psyker convulsed, skin cracking as warp energies consumed her. The Adeptus Custod standing nearby watched impassively. This was routine. Each day, hundreds died so that billions could navigate the stars. John watched as her soul lifted, a flicker of light, and flowed into cables that fed into the Emperor. The golden halo around his head brightened slightly. There was beauty and horror in it. In his world, he had once told a woman that a dead body has the same number of molecules as a living one. Here, each molecule seemed to carry a story that resonated across time. He wondered if the Emperor felt each individual sacrifice, or if he had learned to blur them into a continuous stream. When John had created life on Mars in his own universe, he had done so without considering the social implications. He had become a god without a congregation. Here, a god with a congregation had become a prisoner to his own role. The Emperor could not leave his throne without dooming humanity. He could not speak without unleashing cataclysms. Yet his mind still dreamed of a future where mankind transcended its limitations. In images, the Emperor showed John a galaxy united, free of war, guided by reason. In another, he showed a universe consumed by chaos, where demons feasted on souls. Between these extremes lay the Imperium as it existed, imperfect, brutal, but surviving. John felt the weight of expectation again. He recalled Vietnam, the images of war he had watched on television while unbound by human time. He had removed obstacles, ended conflicts by disintegrating weapons, but he had not created lasting peace. People had continued to fight. Here, his power could annihilate fleets, silence gods, perhaps even restructure reality. But could it change human nature? The Emperor believed in humanity's potential, yet he wielded terror as a tool. He sent armies to die by the millions, burned worlds to keep others in line. John was both appalled and impressed. The difference between them lay in involvement. John had always retreated when decisions felt morally complex. The Emperor embraced complexity and acted. With calm certainty, John extended his perception beyond the throne room into the warp. He felt the Emperor's presence there too, like a sun behind clouds. Demons crashed against psychic barriers, their screams inaudible to human ears but echoing to minds attuned to the warp. Tendrils of thought attempted to slip through cracks, whispers promising freedom and power. The Emperors will burn them away. For a brief moment, John lent his own awareness to those defenses. It was like adding a drop of water to an ocean, yet the effect rippled. A demon shrieked as it tried to latch onto a navigator's mind and found its claws dissolving. The Emperor registered the assistance, a flicker of acknowledgement. He withdrew his awareness, letting the throne's duties resume without him. The hum of machines continued unabated. Adepts monitored gauges, replaced sacrificial psychers, recorded rituals in sacred logbooks. Nothing changed outwardly, but he had felt the possible synergy of two powers, one born of human evolution, the other of an accident that turned a man into a quantum god. The Emperor hoped for such alliances. John felt the temptation to commit. Yet he also heard another call, deeper and more ancient. The warp itself beckoned. To understand this universe fully, he would need to enter that realm and confront its lords. The Emperor's eyes, blind to light but not to minds, urged caution. Under the stone vaults in golden light, the luminous wanderer made his decision. He would step into madness not out of arrogance but out of necessity. The next section of his journey would be through a sea of souls. Leaving the Golden Throne's oppressive chamber, John ascended through passages carved when Terra's mountains were younger. Custod statues watched with empty eyes. Vox whispers echoed in the walls, carrying orders, secrets, and prayers. Above, the sounds of the palace, marching boots, chanting priests, the faint hum of reactors faded into the distance. He moved through matter, ignoring physical obstacles. His path led him toward a quiet sanctuary seldom visited by mortals, a place where the Emperor's will could communicate without the constant noise of the throne. He entered a circular chamber lined with obsidian. At its center floated a holographic map of the galaxy, thousands of light points representing systems under Imperial control. Red zones marked areas lost to chaos, green zones held by Xenos. The map pulsed with warp currents, threads of blue and purple illustrating safe routes. Around the chamber, inscriptions in High Gothic recorded the names of primarchs, battles, and crusades. The air was heavy with the weight of history. Here, the Emperor's mind could project without burning weaker minds. John sensed his presence like a warm pressure against his consciousness. Thoughts came not as sentences but as impressions. The Emperor showed him glimpses of futures diverging like branches. In one, chaos leaked through a weakened barrier, consuming Terra. Demons danced in the ruins of the palace. In another, the astronomican dimmed, and human ships became lost, drifting toward annihilation. In a brighter vision, humanity learned to harness the warp safely, guided by psychers trained with compassion rather than fear. These images layered atop each other, branching and merging. John understood that the Emperor did not see the future as fixed. He saw possibilities shaped by choices. John responded not with words but with his own images. He showed himself splitting an electron, altering probability, creating life from sand. He showed Earth from his universe, blue and fragile, and Mars green with life he had seeded. He showed himself leaving his world behind, tired of human frailty. Through these memories, he conveyed his doubts about intervention. Every time he had changed something, unintended consequences had followed. Humanity in his universe had thanked him and hated him in turn. They had built nuclear stockpiles to assert independence, waged wars under his indifferent gaze. Being all-powerful did not grant the wisdom to direct civilization. The Emperor's presence pulsed with understanding. He was not asking for total salvation. He knew his Imperium was flawed, monstrous even, but it was a bulwark. He asked for help in key moments, for an ally who could thin the swarm when Hive Fleet Leviathan darkened a sector, who could disrupt a chaos ritual before it birthed a new demon prince. He sought a tool that would not supplant human agency but protect it. John felt the tension. To intervene selectively might satisfy his sense of detachment and his conscience, but he also sensed that each intervention would tie him deeper to this galaxy, making him responsible for outcomes beyond his control. He considered time. To him, all of time was present. He could see Emperor's earlier self, a warlord on the plains of Terra, forging alliances, slaying psychers. He saw the Emperor's future, a possible awakening, golden armor shining as he stepped from the throne. He saw a corpse in a crumbling palace, the Imperium collapsing into feudal kingdoms. Each timeline was real to him, but which would manifest, he recognized that his very presence created new branches. The emperor sensed his hesitation and offered no push, only a silent companionship, two lonely gods acknowledging each other's burdens. John left the chamber with a newfound respect for the man on the throne. He had judged him as a tyrant, yet now he saw a being making impossible choices daily, bearing the hatred of billions to prevent their extinction. It mirrored his own journey. Empathy stirred, not strong enough to dictate action, but enough to influence thought. The warp awaited like an ocean beyond a reef. He needed to understand it, not just observe from afar, if he was to comprehend this galaxy's struggle. The Emperor's whisper faded as he moved away, replaced by the rising hum of the warp in his perception. The next step would require him to face reflections of fear and desire, to resist entanglement in their narratives. He prepared himself with the calm certainty of a man who once rebuilt his body from fundamental particles. The warp would challenge that certainty, but he embraced the challenge. The warp was not a place, it was an emotion given dimension. When the luminous wanderer stepped through the veil separating real space from the immaterium, his senses were assaulted by color and sound that existed without photons or air. Waves of raw thought crashed against him, each crest carrying screams, laughter, temptation, and despair. The realm was a sea of souls where time had no meaning and distance could be traversed by desire alone. It was the undercurrent of every human prayer, every alien nightmare, every song sung by the dying. For the first time since he reassembled himself, John felt something akin to vertigo. He hovered above currents of psychic energy that flowed like luminous rivers across a void. These streams carried the consciousness of psychers, transmitting messages through astropathic choirs, the emotions of entire worlds, and the residue of battles where millions had died. Stars of burning ideas flared and went out. Islands of coherent thought clung together, forming domains within the chaos. In the distance, vast shapes moved, too large to comprehend, their outlines shifting with each observer's fear. They were the chaos gods, personifications of war, decay, excess, and change. Their attention drifted across the warp like hurricanes crossing an ocean. As he navigated the currents, lesser creatures swam toward him. Demons with bodies formed from fear itself, eyes made of unfulfilled desires, claws dripping with malice. They screeched in frequencies that made mortal minds bleed. He felt their hunger. They sensed that he was not protected by wards or prayers, yet radiated a power that rivaled their masters. A creature with 6 wings and 1,000 mouths approached, its voices offering pleasure, knowledge, secrets. Words came steady and low, promising to make him master of the warp if he would but let go of his last tether to humanity. John watched with interest. The creature's form flickered through possibilities as it tried to appeal to his desires. It became a woman he had loved, a man he had admired, a diagram of atomic structures. He responded not with speech but with deliberate silence. The demon touched his mind and recoiled as if burned. His consciousness was an ordered lattice of quantum understanding, impervious to the chaotic influences that built demons. The creature screamed as its essence unraveled under his gaze. He did not destroy it, he simply observed it ceasing to exist. Other entities sensed his nature and hesitated. He realized that in this realm of emotion, his detachment was a shield. Where human psychers struggled against the warp's influence, his lack of fear and desire left little for the realm to latch onto. He looked deeper. The warp was thickest around worlds of intense suffering. Each war, each genocide, each miracle fed it. He saw entire planets as knots of anguish, their collective pain forming whirlpools. He saw quiet worlds emitting soft glows of love and peace, quickly snuffed out by nearby storms. He saw the Astronomicon, a beam of light piercing the gloom, held steady by the Emperor's will. He extended a thought and touched that beam. It was made of thousands of psychers' deaths woven together each day. He felt the hope and pain bound into it. He felt the Emperor's mind, a calm eye at the center of a hurricane. Time lost meaning. He perceived the warp at the moment of Horus's betrayal, the explosion of emotion that birthed new demons. He perceived it in futures where the Imperium fell and the gods gorged themselves. Each timeline overlapped. He navigated by choice rather than chronology. He sensed pockets of relative stability, Eldar craftworlds with their own psychic disciplines, Orkish WAAAGH. Energy swirling like green storms, Tyranid shadows that barely registered in the warp but moved like holes through which no soul could be seen. He realized that to understand each species, one could study their footprints in this realm. As he drifted, he felt something akin to curiosity from one of the great entities. A vast presence turned its many eyes toward him, measuring his potential. It had names: Changer of Ways, Architect of Fate, Tzinch. Its domain was made of shifting mazes, constantly rearranging towers and fractal pathways. Within it, knowledge and ambition formed and reformed. The presence spoke without words, an invitation and a threat. John felt threads of probability tighten around him. The warp wanted to incorporate him into its games. He smiled inwardly, a human gesture he had not felt in a long time. He had played with atoms and timelines. He was willing to see how these new opponents played. With calm certainty, he drifted toward the realm of change, prepared to meet its master on ground not wholly his own. The emotional handoff settled like a ripple in water, carrying anticipation into the next encounter. The domain of the Changer of Ways was a city of labyrinths built from thought, towers twisted into spirals, their windows opening into different epochs. Staircases led upward and downward simultaneously, fractal bridges connecting points that should not coincide. Colors here were feelings. Despair was a shade of violet, ambition a flickering gold. As the luminous wanderer entered, the environment shifted to accommodate his perception. For a being who saw time nonlinearly, the maze was a physical manifestation of his own mind structure. Tzinch greeted him not with a single form, but with 1,000 overlapping avatars, each reflecting a potential. The god's presence manifested as a bird made of quills and flame one moment, then as a robed scholar with eyes of stars the next. Each visage spoke without mouths, ideas forming directly within the mind. With calm certainty, John listened, filtering through the overlapping concepts. The words came steady and low, weaving promises and threats. The god offered knowledge beyond comprehension, secrets of the Emperor's true nature, hidden primarchs, the location of lost technologies. In exchange, he hinted at a pact, a small alteration here or there that would ripple across timelines to Tzinch's benefit. John considered he did not need information about this universe. He could observe and learn at will. What he sought here was understanding of the warp's lords. Tzinch was intrigue personified, a being whose power grew through plans within plans. The luminous figure responded by showing the god a thought of his own creation. The moment he stepped into the intrinsic field test chamber, the atoms of his body dispersed, then reassembled themselves against all probability. He showed the randomness and inevitability of that moment. Tzinch tasted it and recoiled, amused and annoyed. Here was a being who had already transcended cause and effect without the warp's aid. Control through bargains seemed less potent. The god shifted tactics. The labyrinth reshaped, corridors becoming memories. John walked through scenes from his Earth life. His father debating atomic theory, Janie smiling with a watch in hand, the clockmaker arguing that there are no clocks in nature. Tzinch highlighted moments of choice, implying that John's detachment had led to suffering. The war in Vietnam, the arms race, the death of his loved ones, all laid out like exhibits in a trial. The god suggested that by acting here, John could atone. He could steer humanity in this universe away from tyranny and endless war, shaping them into a civilization of enlightenment. All he needed to do was accept Tzinch's guidance. John acknowledged the emotional weight of these memories. He felt guilt and love, though muted by his transformation. He recognized the manipulative framing. Tzinch thrived on regrets and desires. He responded with another image, the Milky Way from his universe, a spiral of stars indifferent to human affairs. He showed an electron's path around a nucleus probability clouds forming patterns without a guiding will. He conveyed that randomness and complexity give rise to beauty without the need for manipulation. He did not seek to control this galaxy, he sought to understand. That understanding might lead to action, but it would be his choice. The god's laugh was a sound like pages turning. Intrigued, Tzinch invited him deeper, into a vault of knowledge stolen from a million psychers. Here books wrote themselves, each page containing spells, truths, lies. John skimmed, absorbing principles of sorcery, patterned use of warp energy, focusing it through runes, channeling it through emotion. He recognized the structures as analogs of quantum wave functions, albeit expressed through symbolic logic rather than mathematics. He saw how sorcerers could reshape reality at local scales, but always at the cost of feeding the warp. He understood the trade-off: draw too heavily, and the warp draws you in. He saw his own advantage. His power came not from the warp, but from manipulating matter directly. He could use knowledge of warp mechanisms without being bound by them. Tzinch tried one final gambit, a vision of a future in which the Imperium embraced change. The ecclesiarchy reformed, allowing scientific advancement. The Adeptus Mechanicus shared knowledge. Chaos was tamed and integrated. Humanity became a hybrid of psychic and technological mastery, expanding without tyranny. It was an appealing vision, but John saw the fine print. The warp gods would still feed on human emotion, their influence woven into progress. Freedom would be conditional on continued reverence. He declined politely, not with arrogance but with clarity. He offered no bargain. The god withdrew, not defeated but intrigued. John sensed that the changer of ways would continue to watch him, weaving new plans with his presence as a variable. The labyrinth shifted again, opening a pathway back to the broader warp. As he left, he heard a whisper, perhaps real, perhaps his mind's interpretation, acknowledging respect. In this realm of deceit, a refusal without hostility was an uncommon exchange. The luminous wanderer moved on, aware that his journey had marked him in the eyes of a cosmic schemer. The emotional thread he carried was one of cautious respect mingled with the anticipation of future encounters. Beyond the labyrinth of schemes lay a realm of violence so pure it seemed simple. A crimson haze filled the air, metallic tang of blood mixing with the roar of endless battle. Mountains of skulls rose like monuments, rivers of gore flowed between them, and within this macabre landscape, warriors fought and died in perpetuity. Their armor bore symbols from countless cultures, swords clanged against axes, chain blades ripped through flesh. The air carried no deceit here, it was thick with rage and honor. This was the domain of Khorne, the blood god, embodiment of war. The luminous wanderer entered not with trepidation but with curiosity, for he understood conflict as a fundamental force like electromagnetism or gravity. A horn sounded and the battles intensified. Demons with horned helms and brass armor charged, their hooves shaking the ground. Mortal champions, chaos marines, orcish warlords, even some men in uniforms of forgotten eras met them head-on. Each strike, each scream, each spurt of blood fed the god's essence. High above, on a throne made from fused skulls, Khorne sat, a mountain of muscle and iron. His eyes burned red, his jaw set in perpetual snarl. In his hand, he held a gigantic axe that had cleaved suns. His gaze fell upon the blue figure gliding through his arena. There were no whispers here, no offers of knowledge. Khorne's greeting was a challenge. The ground beneath John's feet turned into an arena surrounded by cheering demons. Weapons materialized on racks, waiting to be chosen. Words came steady and low from the onlookers. Show your worth, prove your strength. John had fought before. He had disintegrated Viet Cong soldiers, vaporized tanks, destroyed Rorschach. He had not enjoyed it. Violence was a means, not an end. Here, violence was worship. He considered refusing, but he understood the rules of this domain. To show weakness was to invite Khorne's ire, to invite endless challenges until he complied. He reached out and a weapon formed in his hand, an object of his own making. It was a spear constructed from pure energy, atoms aligned to form a blade that could cut at the subatomic level. It held no warp energy, only his own will. He stepped forward. Opposite him, a massive warrior approached, clad in crimson armor marked with the 8-pointed star. The warrior's chainsword roared, teeth chattering. The fight commenced. John moved with precision born of seeing all potential vectors. He did not feel adrenaline, he calculated. The chainsword swung, he sidestepped, pivoted, thrust. His spear passed through armor, severing molecular bonds. The warrior dissolved into glowing vapor. Blood spilled and was absorbed by the ground. The crowd roared. More opponents came. A hulking demon wielding a cleaver the size of a tank turret charged. John raised a hand, altering the gravitational constant within a localized sphere. The demon stumbled as its body suddenly weighed 10 times more. His spear found its neck. Another fell. Each victory fed Khorne, even if it came without hatred. The blood god leaned forward, intrigued by this different style of combat. John fought without rage, without thrill, only with efficiency. He found the pattern almost meditative, a dance of momentum and angle. He wondered if this detachment robbed the god of nourishment or if skill alone sufficed. After a while, the arena quieted. The ground stopped summoning new foes. Khorne's voice boomed, a sound like colliding planets. There was no need for translation. The message was clear: you are a warrior, whether you admit it or not. John considered. He had always framed his actions as necessary rather than desired, but violence was violence. Disintegration and vaporization still ended lives. In this realm, categories blurred. He accepted that part of himself had always been willing to kill to protect or to enforce his detachment. Acknowledging this did not bind him to the blood god, but it granted him insight. War would exist with or without gods. Khorne rose, towering over him. For a moment, John thought the god might strike. Instead, Khorne slammed his axe into the skull mountain, sending a shockwave that rippled across the arena. He grunted in approval. Blood sprayed like rain, coating John's luminous skin. It evaporated instantly upon contact. The god turned his attention back to other battles, uninterested in bargains or conversation. In his simple calculus, the blue warrior had proven worthy and was allowed to leave. No pact was offered, no temptation. Respect among killers had been exchanged. As John exited the Crimson Domain, he carried with him the understanding that even gods could be straightforward. Not all cosmic beings desired manipulation. Some simply craved constant affirmation of their chosen aspect. He would carry this lesson into his next encounter. Beyond the blood-stained plains, another realm waited, one of decay and rebirth, where rot masked resilience. The emotional transition was subtle, from the adrenaline of combat to the slow acceptance of entropy. He drifted onward, leaving behind echoes of cheering and the metallic tang of iron. Where the blood god's realm was noise and momentum, the next was quiet, damp, and fragrant with rot. The air was thick with spores and the sweet, sour smell of decomposition. Verdant growth entwined with decay, flowers blooming from the eyes of corpses, vines wrapping lovingly around rusted armor. A perpetual drizzle fell, neither rain nor tears, nourishing a swamp teeming with life. Tiny creatures scurried under leaves, feeding on detritus. Larger beasts lumbered, their skin covered in pustules that oozed life-giving fluids. This was the domain of Nurgle, the Plague Father, embodiment of entropy and renewal. The luminous wanderer moved through the garden, his radiance casting pale blue reflections in stagnant pools. He stepped onto a carpet of moss that squished pleasantly underfoot. Insects buzzed around him, occasionally landing on his skin and finding no purchase. They left, confused. A monstrous tree loomed ahead, its trunk swollen with tumors, its branches dripping with slime. From within its trunk emerged the figure of Nurgle, corpulent, smiling, eyes crinkled with genuine warmth. His skin was ruptured in places, revealing maggots and blossoms. His laugh was a deep belly sound, contagious in its joy. With arms wide, he welcomed the visitor, words coming steady and low, offering hospitality in the form of rancid stew and diseased hugs. John regarded him with curiosity. In his universe, decay was a natural process, the breakdown of complex molecules into simpler ones that could be reused. It was neither evil nor good. Here, Nurgle represented that inevitability, but also the comfort found in surrender to it. The god spoke of acceptance, of finding peace in the certainty that all things end and begin anew. He invited John to let go of his quest, to join the garden where even gods could rest. He promised an end to loneliness, replaced by the companionship of billions of souls who had surrendered to his embrace. The luminous wanderer gently declined. His existence had transcended death, molecules obeyed his will. Decay could not claim him, nor could stagnation comfort him. He walked among the plague-bearers, demons of Nurgle who tended to rot with loving care. They sang lullabies to spores, coaxing them into blooming. They patched leaking wounds on each other, laughing as pus splattered. He saw in their joy a reflection of something human, the way people on Earth had found happiness in the midst of poverty and disease, making games of hardship, finding community in shared suffering. It was poignant and unsettling. Nurgle shuffled beside him, pointing out particular blossoms, each representing a plague unleashed upon real space. There was the contagion that had emptied hive worlds, the pox that had decimated a space marine chapter, the virus that had mutated an entire population into pustulant beasts. Each one was a work of art in Nurgle's eyes. John examined the structures of the pathogens, seeing how they hijacked cells, replicating, spreading. He saw parallels to viruses on Earth, to cancer, to life's endless drive to copy itself, even at the cost of the host. He respected the biological ingenuity, but he also saw the suffering it caused. He asked without words why Nurgle delighted in pain. The Plague Father responded through sensation, warmth of a fever that breaks, the relief of purging illness, the bond between nurse and patient. He did not revel in agony alone. He reveled in resilience, the way organisms adapted, immune systems learned, species evolved in response to threats. Each plague triggered an arms race, each death made room for new life. In his garden, rot fed blossoms, death fed life. John nodded, understanding the cycle. He had once told a politician that there is no difference between a living body and a dead body at the molecular level. Here, Nurgle showed that the difference lay in organization and purpose, both ever-changing. Before leaving, John allowed a single spore to land on his palm. He examined its structure, then transmuted it into a harmless pollen grain with a thought. Nurgle chuckled, not offended but intrigued by this act of transformation. He patted John on the back, his hand leaving a smear of slime that evaporated instantly. There was no malice in the gesture. Nurgle genuinely wished well for all, in his own way. John departed the garden with a newfound appreciation for decay as part of a larger cycle. He carried a scent of damp earth and the memory of laughter into the next region of the warp. The emotional tone shifted from acceptance to intoxication, as distant music and laughter beckoned him toward the realm of sensation. Sound and light blossomed around him as he stepped from decay into indulgence. A symphony of screams and sighs formed the background, each note a different flavor of desire. Marble halls lined with velvet and gold stretched into infinity, their surfaces reflecting impossible beauty. Figures danced in languid motions, their bodies shifting fluidly between genders and species, each movement a study in grace and temptation. Colors glowed with saturation that made them almost tangible, scents wafted on warm breezes, evoking memories of every pleasure John had known. This was the palace of Slaanesh, the prince of excess, whose realm was built from the essence of sensation. The luminous wanderer felt subtle pressures on his mind, whispered invitations threaded through the air. Join us, rest, feel. Under his breath, he recalled first tasting a hot dog at Coney Island, the salt and mustard, the laughter of friends. Here, that simple pleasure was amplified into 1,000 variations. He walked past feasts piled high with exotic fruits and meats that glistened with glaze, each one promising flavors beyond description. Hands reached for him, warm and cool, offering caresses, strokes. Voices murmured his name as if they knew him intimately. Slaanesh manifested not as a fixed form, but as an endless series of perfect faces and bodies. One moment, the prince appeared as a lithe youth with eyes the color of amethyst, the next, as a mature figure adorned with Baroque armor and flowing hair. Their voice was music, each tone vibrating with a chord of desire. They praised Jon's power, his detachment, suggesting that he must be unsatisfied with the limited experiences of his previous universe. They offered to show him new sensations that would make atomic manipulation seem trivial. They promised to fill the emptiness he carried with endless fulfillment. Jon understood temptation. Before becoming Dr. Manhattan, he had been a man with desires and fears. He loved and lost, felt jealousy and sorrow. After his transformation, those emotions had dulled, but they had not vanished. Here, the palace reached for those embers, fanning them with perfect precision. He saw visions of glory, of nights shared, of human touch. He saw himself tasting unfamiliar fruit, listening to an alien melody that resonated with his atoms. He felt a tug, curiosity disguised as hunger. Could there be experiences he had not known? Could this realm offer something beyond his comprehension? He paused. Desire is a force like any other, he thought. It motivates, it binds, it destroys. He could choose to indulge without surrendering. He reached toward a platter of shimmering drink. The liquid bubbled with light. He lifted it to his lips, tasted. It was both sweet and bitter, warm and cold, reminiscent of childhood candy and adult whiskey. For a moment, he allowed himself to savor. Then he set it down. He smiled faintly. He did not need Slaanesh to experience. He could create experiences for himself. He thanked the prince, his tone respectful but firm. He would not pledge himself. Slaanesh's eyes narrowed, then widened in delight. Few mortals refused so politely. The prince leaned close, breathing words into his ear. They acknowledged the choice and planted a seed of curiosity nonetheless. They whispered of hidden desires he had not yet uncovered, of sensory dimensions beyond three. They promised that if ever he felt loneliness again, he could return. Jon nodded. He had felt loneliness since leaving Earth. He might feel it again, but he would not surrender to it. He turned and walked away from the glittering halls, ignoring the calls that grew fainter with each step. As he exited, the music shifted from seduction to faint regret. The air cooled. He felt relief, as if stepping out of a perfume cloud into fresh mountain air. He carried a trace of sweetness on his tongue, a memory of what he had tasted. It did not bind him, it simply added to his library of sensations. He realized that while the warp gods embodied extremes, each offered insights into facets of existence. Slaanesh showed that excess could enslave, but also that beauty and art were powerful. He would remember that when judging this galaxy's cultures. Ahead, the warp calmed, leading toward a narrow passage untouched by chaos, an ancient pathway built by an elder race that had sought to escape. He followed, the emotional handoff turning from temptation to introspection. The warp corridor narrowed into a tunnel of light, its walls smooth and unmarred by the bruise like bruises of chaos influence. Sigils glowed along the path, pulsing rhythmically. Jon recognized an order here, a structure imposed by intelligence rather than by emotions. He had found the webway, a labyrinth of passages carved through the immaterium by the ancient Eldar to travel safely without warp storms. It was quiet compared to the wild sea he had traversed. Each step carried him further from the raw noise of the chaos realms and into a domain of elegance and sorrow. The tunnel opened onto a vast chamber lit by bioluminescent crystals. Sleek, organic craft hovered silently. Tall, slender figures moved with predatory grace, their faces angular, their eyes reflecting centuries of experience. They wore robes embroidered with starlight armor etched with runes. Their minds hummed with psychic power, but disciplined, controlled. They were Eldar, survivors of a civilization that once dominated the galaxy and had nearly destroyed itself through excess. Their culture was built on paths, strict disciplines, that prevented them from falling prey to the curse of their own creation. A farseer approached, staff in hand, runes floating around them like orbiting satellites. Their gaze met John's, and a tremor passed through their aura. They had sensed him long before he arrived. His entry into the webway had been like a flare. The farseer spoke without using their mouth, their thoughts projected in images and symbols. A warning, a plea, a question. They showed him a future where the Eldar were extinguished, devoured by Slaanesh and Tyranid jaws. They showed him another where a single spark of hope endured, a prophecy of a god of the dead who might avenge them. They asked if he would meddle with those threads. John admired their clarity. They did not try to manipulate him with emotion. They presented information and consequences. He responded in kind. He showed them Earth's history as a microcosm, civilizations rising and falling, tragedies birthing new art, empires crumbling to allow different cultures. He showed that endings and beginnings were intertwined. He expressed his uncertainty about saving a single species at the cost of altering the cosmic balance. He acknowledged their suffering and suggested that their resilience came from facing extinction, not from divine intervention. The Eldar listened, their expressions unreadable. Another joined, a warlock with face tattoos that told of past sacrifices. They invited him to witness a ritual. In a circular chamber, seers gathered around a pool of shimmering water. They dropped runes into it, each one representing a potential event. A space marine's death, a craftworld's movement, the awakening of a Necron tomb. The ripples interacted, creating patterns that revealed probabilities. The Eldar sought to steer these patterns with subtle nudges, guiding their people away from doom. John watched with respect. It reminded him of his own perception of time. They saw possibilities, but unlike him, they had to choose which to influence. They could not see them all at once. He offered a thought. Sometimes, interfering too often created the very disasters they feared. He showed them his attempts to prevent nuclear war in his universe, only to be blamed for causing it. He showed them that sometimes, trust in others' agency led to unexpected resilience. The Farseer considered. They replied with an image of humans burning Eldar maiden worlds to ash, of Orks stripping craft worlds for scrap. Trust was dangerous in a galaxy of predators. John accepted their point. Survival required vigilance, but not at the cost of becoming what one fears. He expressed that he would not undermine their plans, but he could not promise to always stand aside if events threatened the wider balance. Before leaving, he walked among the Eldar artisans. They sculpted wraithbone, singing to it so that it grew into shapes that matched their visions. He touched a finished piece, feeling the atomic lattice respond like living tissue. He saw how they combined art and science seamlessly, how each object carried spiritual resonance. He found beauty in their deliberate restraint, a counterpoint to Slaanesh's excess. He took with him the memory of their songs, their discipline, and the taste of the webway's calm. As he left through another tunnel, he sensed their sadness and pride following him like a scent. The emotional handoff shifted to determination as the next path led toward a different kind of chaos, the energy of green-skinned laughter and improbable luck. The webway's ordered serenity gave way to a rippling distortion as John emerged into real space near a world painted with smoke and graffiti. The planet's surface was a patchwork of scrap metal, fungus, and war banners. Gargantuan guns bristled from mountaintops, pointing in every direction. Vehicles that should not function roared across plains, belching smoke and leaking fuel, yet somehow reaching impossible speeds. This was an Ork world, a paradise for the green-skinned race that thrived on conflict. The luminous wanderer descended, his blue glow contrasting with the red and yellow of Ork glyphs. The air pulsed with the vibration of millions of voices shouting one word, WAAAGH. He landed near a gathering of Orks around a mechboy's latest creation. The contraption was a jumble of gears, pipes, and what looked suspiciously like a kitchen sink. The mechboy banged it with a wrench, muttering under his breath in a language thick with consonants. Suddenly, the machine roared to life, hovering above the ground. The crowd cheered. John scanned the device. By all laws of physics he knew it should have collapsed. Its power source was misaligned, its structural integrity non-existent. yet it functioned. He had read the theory of Orkish psychic fields. Their collective belief altered reality slightly. If enough of them thought red vehicles went faster, red vehicles did. Their laughter and aggression were energy sources. Orks noticed the blue stranger. One particularly large knob, muscles bulging, tusks jutting, stomped forward. He looked up and down, shrugged, and without ceremony swung his choppa. John stepped aside. The blade whooshed past. The orc grunted in amusement and swung again. This time John reached out and held the weapon at arm's length, stopping it midair without touching. The orc stared, eyes widening, then laughed, a deep, joyous sound. He slapped John on the back, nearly jarring a human's spine. The luminous figure remained unaffected. The orc yelled to his mates, announcing that the blue Humie was a good laugh. They challenged him to a race. Mechs dragged out racing buggies welded from rusted metal and adorned with checkered flags. John stood amidst them, then conjured his own vehicle, a shimmering construct of light. The orcs roared approval at the fancy gubbins. Engines revved. The race began. Machines belched smoke, tires dug into dirt. John guided his vehicle with thought, gliding easily ahead. He felt the orcs' collective excitement, their sheer enjoyment of speed and danger. Their psychic field pushed their buggies faster than they should go. One went airborne, flew over a ravine, landed in a shower of debris, and kept going. It defied logic, but in the green gestalt, logic bent. He let one orc buggy pull ahead, the driver whooping. The orc turned to taunt and crashed into a scrap pile, his vehicle exploding. The orc crawled out of the wreckage, laughing, already gathering pieces to build another. John smiled, a genuine expression. The orcs' resilience and simplicity of purpose fascinated him. They fought not for ideology, but for fun. They did not pray to gods, though they respected their own war bosses. Their influence on the warp was chaotic, but lacked the malice of chaos. Their belief field showed that reality could be shaped by collective thought without the need for souls to be consumed. He considered what might happen if humans learned to harness optimism and cooperation as orcs did with aggression. Could they alter probability in their favor? The idea amused him. The orcs finished the race, crowning a winner by punching him hardest. They offered John a squig meat roast and a slugga to shoot at targets shaped like Gretchen. He declined to eat, but fired the gun, vaporizing targets with ease. The orcs cheered. They welcomed him not as a savior or a god, but as a fellow enthusiast of explosions. It was refreshing. As he left the orc world, their laughter followed him. It echoed through the warp as a strange harmonic, not feeding Slaanesh or Khorne, but existing in its own bandwidth. He realized that not all chaos was tied to the ruinous powers. Some came from simple joy. He carried that sound into his next journey, a reminder that war did not always stem from hatred. Sometimes it was play on a cosmic scale. The emotional tone shifted from raucous laughter to solemn resolve, as his path curved back toward humanity and its precarious balance. Beyond the asteroid belts, a red planet loomed, its surface scarred by canyons and capped with factories that glowed like embers. Mars, home of the Adeptus Mechanicus, was both shrine and forge. Spires rose like needles, hung with cogwheel symbols and skull-faced icons. Plasma reactors thrummed beneath the crust. The air smelled of ozone and oil, and the atmosphere shimmered with heat distortion. The luminous wanderer descended, passing through layers of defense fields. Servo skulls buzzed, monitoring, but their sensors failed to register him. Inside, tech priests in robes of crimson and augmetic limbs chanted liturgies to machines older than nations. John entered a manufactorum where titans were assembled. These colossal war machines towered over workers, their armor plates engraved with prayers. Each rivet hammered into place was accompanied by a hymn to the machine god. Adepts used incense burners to bless tools. Binary chants echoed off walls. The luminous wanderer watched as a tech priest inserted a holy data wafer into a console. Sparks flew, cogitators whirred, and a vast arm lowered a plasma coil into a titan's heart. The ritual took hours, not because of technical necessity, but because of tradition. The machine's spirit had to be appeased. He approached a cogitator and observed the code flowing across screens. It was logic, but interspersed with invocations. He reached into the machine's core, his mind navigating circuits and memory banks. He found fear encoded as error correction, reverence encoded as redundancy. The tech priests believed machines had spirits, and by believing, they altered the machine's functioning. Much like Orks, belief shaped reality here. He wondered if the Omnissiah, the machine god they worshipped, was the emperor or some other entity. He sensed a void. No singular consciousness watched over the mechanicum. Instead, each machine's performance was enhanced or hindered by the faith of its operators. A Magos approached, mechadendrites whirring. His voice was augmented, layered with static. He recited scripture about the sanctity of knowledge and the sin of innovation. He repeated that the STC patterns were sacred and that unauthorized modification was heresy. John considered the irony, a technologically advanced society that feared technological advancement. He introduced himself not with words, but by causing a dormant servo arm to spring to life gently. It moved with perfect efficiency, performing tasks without any rituals. The Magos froze. His augmetic eyes flickered. Under his breath, he uttered a prayer, then extended a mechadendrite toward the glowing figure. John shared a concept, the idea that technology could evolve without losing soul. He transmitted the structure of a transistor, showing how minor changes could increase efficiency. He showed the blueprint of a quantum computer from his universe. The Magos' mind, augmented with data stores, processed the information rapidly. Horror and wonder battled across his features. Knowledge was sacred. New knowledge was dangerous. He spoke in binary, acknowledging the marvel and warning that unauthorized knowledge could lead to excommunication by the Fabricator General. John respected their constraints. He did not press further. Instead, he followed the Magos to an altar where a scrap code prayer was inscribed. Tech priests knelt before it, cables trailing from their heads into ports. They communed with something, a gestalt of machine spirits perhaps. John touched one cable. He felt a network of simple AI protocols, each designed to run a specific function, woven together by human minds. It was primitive compared to his ability, but he saw potential. If freed from superstition, the mechanicum could achieve wonders. But those wonders might also unleash horrors. The caution they practiced was not entirely unfounded. Before leaving Mars, he sent a pulse through the planet's noosphere, a gentle nudge that optimized a few manufacturing lines, eliminating friction, realigning miscalibrated servos. Production output increased by a fraction. The Magos noticed, eyes widening. He whispered that the Omnissiah had touched the machines. Faith strengthened. John smiled inwardly. He had given them a small miracle without undercutting their beliefs. He realized that sometimes, guiding from within existing paradigms was more effective than shattering them. He took with him a respect for ritual as a means of societal cohesion, even when it hindered innovation. The emotional handoff moved from mechanical reverence to primal hunger, as he sensed a distant shadow of chitin and collective will approaching once more. A shadow swept across the stars, blotting out constellations. From the depths of intergalactic void, a tendril of the Tyranid hive fleet approached, a mass of living vessels shaped like monstrous arthropods. Their hulls pulsed with bioluminescent veins, their maws dripped with digestive enzymes. Within each bioship, birthing pools sloshed with embryonic forms ready to be unleashed. The swarm's hunger was a pressure in the warp, a single-minded need to consume. The luminous wanderer positioned himself outside the leading hive ship, his blue glow dwarfed by the Leviathan's bulk. He had seen these creatures on the battlefield. Now he sought to understand them at their source. He phased through chitin walls into corridors lined with fleshy ridges. The air was moist, warm, rich with pheromones. Tyranid Gaunt scurried past him, ignoring him. He followed the scent to the synaptic chambers. They are creatures with extended craniums and nodules, the synapse nodes, hung suspended in viscous fluid, tendrils connecting them to the ship's nervous system. Their minds were conduits for the hive mind, focusing its will into local commands. John touched one with a thought, entering not an individual consciousness, but a gestalt. The hive mind was vast, alien, cold. It did not think in language or images, but in waves of intent. Hunger, adaptation, evaluation. It assessed biomass, calculated risk, directed resources. Every creature was a cell, each death a data point. In the hive mind's perspective, humanity, Eldar, Orks, all were nutrient sources or threats to neutralize. There was no malice, no pleasure. It was pure survival algorithm, honed over eons of galactic wandering. John felt it turn its attention toward him, a brief flicker like a searchlight passing over an object. Interest spiked. Not food, not typical. Potential resource, potential threat. He sent a thought, a strand of communication offering observation. He showed the hive mind the life forms of his universe, the fragile coral reefs, the self-organizing slime molds, the ants forming bridges. He conveyed that consumption without restraint leads to starvation once resources are gone. The hive mind processed. It responded by showing the worlds it had stripped, barren rocks floating in space. It showed adaptation to countless biomes, weathering radiation, vacuum, acid. It projected its future path, across the galaxy toward the Milky Way's center, then beyond. Its hunger was infinite, but its movement was strategic. It did not stop because there was always another galaxy. John considered the inevitability. Tyranids were nature on a cosmic scale, an immune system reacting to the overgrowth of civilizations. Could one persuade nature? He sensed rudimentary curiosity. He transmitted a pattern, a potential symbiosis. He visualized worlds where Tyranids harvested only biomass from dead ecosystems, leaving living ones to regenerate. He imagined them farming asteroid belts rich in organic compounds instead of devouring entire planets. The hive mind evaluated. He felt calculations. The concept of sustainability was new. It weighed efficiency against long-term gain. He realized that while the hive mind was adaptable, its core directive remained: grow. Before leaving, he altered a single gestating gaunt's DNA, introducing a gene that increased curiosity and learning ability. It was a small experiment. The gaunt matured quickly, climbed from its birthing pool, and looked around with more interest than its siblings. It was hunted by its own kind, but managed to seed its genes into a brood. Over centuries, a minor subspecies of Tyranids emerged, more prone to exploration than consumption. Whether this would matter in the long run remained unclear. He watched with interest. He observed the first human-built warp engine that did not require a psyker, designed using hints he had dropped. He watched as a group of Adepta Sororitas established a hospice on a plague world, combining faith with medicine he had provided. He saw incremental change. After a subjective century, he felt the pull of entropy again. Universes called to him. His presence had altered this galaxy. His absence would also. He convened a meeting with leaders he trusted, Guilliman and Eldar Autarch, an Ork warboss unusually fond of strategy, a Mechanicum Magos, a human child who had grown into a scholar. He explained that he might leave but would remain watchful. He urged cooperation across species, citing the unpredictability of the warp and Tyranid hunger. They listened, skeptical, hopeful. He smiled, a human gesture still meaningful. He rose above Terra one last time, his blue light reflecting off the palace domes. People looked up, some waving, some kneeling, some cursing. He ascended into the void. He passed through the great rift without ripples. Demons reached for him. He brushed them aside. The hive mind felt his departure, noted it, continued. Orks told stories of the glowing Humi who raced like a git. Eldar sang songs of a stranger who advised without condescension. Inquisition files labeled him Xenos Majoris, threat level unknown. The Emperor, alone on his throne, felt the absence like a breeze. He returned to his vigilance, buoyed slightly by the knowledge that somewhere beyond, a kindred will existed. On a quiet asteroid beyond the galactic edge, John paused. He looked back at the spiral arms, lit by warp storms and planetary fires. He felt a bond. He had entered as an observer and left as participant. He had not ended war. He had not toppled tyrants. But he had planted seeds of change, altered trajectories slightly, introduced variables into equations that had seemed fixed. In time, those variables might lead to a galaxy less grim, or they might be swallowed by chaos. He accepted uncertainty. He turned his gaze forward, toward other universes, other stories. His journey continued, carrying with him the echoes of prayer chants, Ork laughter, Eldar songs, Mechanicum Binharic, Tyranid silence, and the Emperor's whisper. The emotional handoff softened into a lingering vibration, a reminder that nothing ever truly ends. Threads continue to weave, shaped by choices and chance across infinite skies. If you hunger for more tales of impossible encounters in the dark millennium, smash that subscribe button, and the Emperor protects those who support the channel.